Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. We are going to be doing a pre-meta analysis for Spikemuth Cup. At the time that you will see this video, there has already been a couple tournaments and a few things that people have played. I prepared the materials for this before those tournaments came out, so there might be a few months that you might call out like, hey, what about this one, or what about this other one? So just know that I prepared the materials before this, so I'll make some comments when we get to those. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about months that were recently very good and that are going to continue to be very good. Then we're going to talk about months that got major buffs, months that are probably good or maybe good, but I'm holding on my boat for them, and finally a couple of dark horses. And then I'm going to show you a couple of key cores that I think might be worth testing for you if you are looking for ideas and for something first. So to start, let's talk about Rilla and Rilla. Rilla was running Assault Vest recently because wanted to tank easily a water spout or two water spouts and still be able to one-shot Kyogre. Now I think given the lack of Kyogre, you're probably gonna want to run a Grassy Seed on it. And you can basically just one-shot a couple of things. And the things that you're not one-shotting, you're doing an unbelievable amount of damage. Rilla is an interesting one because it was running Focus Sash, it was running Life Orb, it was running Magnet. I think a Choice Spec set is very strong with Rilla, especially if you pair it with Serena. So you can't be Fake Out, you can't take a Grassy Glide. You can actually EV Rilla to tank a Grassy Seed Glassy Glide by giving it, I think it was either 92 or 100 defense CVs. I think an Electro Ball with specs does about 70 to 80% to Amoonguss too. So it's a couple of clever things you can do with a Lecky. So keep an open mind when you're building with it, because I think it can be a very strong one. Tapu Fini was very strong in a couple of very specific teams. I mightily struggled against it in Series 12. When I was playing in Bilbao and Frankfurt this year, if I saw Tapu Fini, I automatically knew I was going to lose the game. It was basically, my team was built in such a way that I could KO a bunch of things, and then I wasn't going to worry about Tapu Fini. Lo and behold, I saw two Tapu Finis both games, and or both tournaments, and I lost both games. So, strong one, nothing to sneeze at. I think Calm Mind is really good. I think when the earlier meta started where Fini was available, for Sword and Shield, people were running it with a Wiki Berry and a Calm Mindset. I think you can do that. You can also run it with specs, so I think it can be good in both ways. Whimsicott feels that it's not as strong as it was before, but it's still a Fairy type that can hit Urshifu with a Moonblast. So I think there's still a little bit of value to it, and it's still one that I think should be in your consideration when you're building teams. Tornadus and Thunderous, I think Torn is an interesting one because I think that Prankster has some value, but I feel like Defiant has a lot of value. Run this thing next to a Terrain Setter. All of a sudden it's a little bit bulky, and you have Acrobatics without an item, and with Defiant. It also gets Superpower, so you can be +1 in Superpower and Instant. So it's an interesting one to look at for sure. I think this is one that I would urge you to keep an open mind with. Thunderous, I think the Defiance set is not quite as strong. I think it doesn't get Acrobatics, for example. So I think a set on the Prankster side, I think it's going to be a little bit more useful. It was using Eerie Impulse, D-Wave, or Scary Face before. I don't know that the speed control is quite as necessary anymore, but I think it's something I'll look out for. Kartana, I think, is one of the better mons in the format. There's going to be a lot of Fairy types in the meta because of the Urshifus. And there's going to be a lot of bulky water types too, I think. So I believe Kartana should be very strong. Grimmsnarl is one that doesn't quite feel as overpowering as it was in other metas, but it's still a Fairy type that can Spirit Break things, starting with Urshifu. So I think it's still interesting to use screens. I think Spirit Break is the play. I run a lot of Foul Play. Sven's probably watching this video and laughing because I literally just ran Foul Play all of Series 11 and Series 12 too. So I would say keep an eye for it. I think Spirit Break is the stronger set in the meta. I think Trick should go away. Again, I don't think Speed Control is quite as important anymore. It's certainly, important and nice, but it's not as important because you don't need to deal with max airstream. So, just something to think about. Amoonguss and Zapdos are, I think, really strong with a Rocky Helmet. I think there's different ways to run it, but I think this is probably the better sets on them. A Rocky Helmet Amoonguss switching for, say, an Insane that is about to take a Surging Strikes, all of a sudden is going to take 3 hits from a Rocky Helmet. Then something like a Zapdos, again with a Rocky Helmet, being able to take a Grassy Glide and then deal damage back by just existing and potentially paralyzing your opponent. So I think Zapdos is going to be really good. I think you can look at Thunder Wave, you can look at Eerie Impulse. I think you're definitely going to want to Roost on it though. Finally, P2. P2 in the recent metas was running Foul Play and Eerie Impulse. And Trace. In this meta, I think you're going to find Ice Beam, Tri Attack, and Thunderbolt to be a lot more useful. And you're going to want to run it with Download and try to get those special attack boosts. You can get one special attack boost and you have a mon that cannot be removed that is dealing an insane amount of damage now. At least for something as bulky as it is. So, something to look out for. Now, on my next tier, these are mons that I think have gotten major buffs by virtue of not having Dynamax, not having to deal with max airstream, or by the removal of restricteds. So, for example, both Urshifus, now you don't have to deal with Protect. I think this one's fairly obvious, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about them. There are metas similar to Spikemuth Cup, where is Series 7, Series 9, no Dynamax, but no Urshifu or Gothitelle. So this is definitely something to look out for. I think these are two of the stronger mons in the meta. Volcarona was incredibly powerful in Series 10. It used to pair very well with Xerneas, where you could Rage Powder a station and now all of a sudden risk a Flame Body on it. People would actually even go to and I did this myself, where I would do Amoonguss and Volcarona with Xerneas and give Xerneas Substitute, and then all of a sudden you literally couldn't kill Xerneas. I don't think there's a mon that is quite as overwhelming as Xerneas, obviously, but I have a few ideas that I think you can run this and see a lot of success. Lando I think is going to be stronger than Lando T. This thing has Sheer Force, and if you're not aware, it doesn't take Life Orb damage. So I think the absolute must move for this is Earth Power. I would argue Sludge Bomb is also a must-have, but I think from there you have a conversation about Psychic, Rock Slide, Stone Edge, Substitute, Protect, even Grass Knot. So there's a couple of things that you can run with this. Here is one of the more controversial picks here. I think Como is one of the best mons in the format. This is my opinion. If you don't like my opinion, let me know. And I know that your comment is going to be along the lines of, oh my god, there's so many fairies in the meta, what the heck are you talking about? Pair this thing with Kartana and Nihilego, and how the heck are fairies going to kill us? It straight up, like if you pair Como correctly, it can't die. It has Stab Body Press, Iron Defense, Substitute, Protect, Leftovers. Can't die. Pair this thing correctly, and Como is just gonna win games. I've been doing random testing in ladder where I just play poorly and brain dead, and I basically just bring Como, and Como just beats everything. And if you're standing behind a sub, all of a sudden you take a Moonblast, and then all of a sudden you're doing 80% to a Tapu Fini at +4 or whatever you amount, or +4 or +6. So it's definitely something, or it's definitely a mon that you don't want to sleep on. Is all I'm gonna say. Suicune is also an unbelievably strong Pokemon. I messed up this game right now. I think Suicune is also an unbelievably strong Pokemon. It's very difficult to KO it. It's very bulky. And I think if you pair it correctly with potentially a terrain setter that is in Rillaboom, you can even mess up other Rillabooms. Entei, being able to Sacred Fire and get a 50% chance of burn is very strong. Do not sleep on this Pokemon. Both of these have inner focus. And by the way, on Como, you have two broken abilities in Overcoat. Being able to not take sleep powders and spores is very good. And number two, you can make this soundproof, and all of a sudden Sylveon can hyper voice you. So just look out for that. Milotic is a mon that saw some success in Series 10. And I know I skipped a few, I'm just going to jump around here. But Milotic is one I really want to talk about because it's competitive. I think if you put this thing with like Scald Coil, Hypnosis Protect, it can be really good. It paired with Sation very well in previous metas. But I think it can be really good. Now, Serena, it says Sleep Guard here, so obviously it's supposed to be Queenly Majesty. This thing can obviously stop Grassy Lights, stop Fake Outs, gets Power Whip, and one-shots a bunch of things. In Series 10, it actually paired with Rillaboom, and people were giving it Grassy Light. And for the teams that didn't have Rillaboom, sometimes you were still running Grassy Light to hit other things. I cannot tell you how many times I picked up a station that was very low with Grassy Light that their Rillaboom had. So it's an interesting one, and I would definitely urge you to think about it. I'm going to give you a note and a hint that you may not have calculated. Life Orb Triple Axle one-shots Rillaboom. Nihilego is one where I think has the potential to be one of the stronger mons in the meta. It gets Trick Room, first of all, so you can all of a sudden like just do something very weird with it. Meteor Beam, Power Herb, Sludge Bomb. Being able to Meteor Beam, get a +1, and pick up a KO, and be +2 after the first turn is insanely strong. It has very poor defense, so make sure you pair it with something that can intimidate, give it a little bit of defense bulk. I think that depending on what you needed to do in your team, you're going to find that you don't need to make it max special attack, potentially not even max speed. There's a couple of things you can do with it, so look out for it. This one it can be very strong. Galarian Birds, I think, are very good in this meta. I think if you get a nasty plot from Galarian Moltres and you start dishing out Fiery Rats, the game can get out of control very quickly, especially knowing it can flinch. Galarian Zapdos cannot be intimidated. They put in something on the field where they shouldn't, and all of a sudden you're dishing out a +1 Brave Bird, Thunderous Kick, or Close Combat. It can also do coaching. So pair it with the right mons and the right moves, I think it can be very strong. Togekiss, it says Hustle. Obviously, I would expect you to run Serene Grace or Super Luck. Has 4-slot Syndrome. Dazzling Gleam, Air Slash, Heat Wave, Follow Me, Helping Hand, Protect. Heck, you can even run Aura Sphere. I think it gets Shadow Ball too. I think this is a very flexible mon that if you pair it correctly, it can be very strong. T-Tar, you can potentially even run a weakness policy on this thing given the Spadef boosts. You can even run Dragon Dance on this. I think T-Tar has a couple of interesting things you can do with it. Don't sleep on it. It's also a weather setter, so just look out for it. Dragonite and Mienshao. Dragonite with a Life Orb can effectively two-shot like 90% of the meta with an extreme speed. You are one-shotting your Rillaboom, Serenas, etc. with dual Wing Beat. Things that have a focus sash like the Urshifus are taking big damage from it. Mienshao, for example, is a fighting type that has a very fast fake out that can close combat and just start picking up KOs. It's a lot of success with Kali Shadow because it could Wide Guard against another Kali Shadow and it could one-shot instant. I think not necessarily together, but these two ones have a lot of potential. Superpower Dragonite with a Life Orb can KO some instants. Choice Band superpower is a guaranteed. So have an eye out for this one. I think this too can be very strong. I think Mienshao is not going to be quite as strong as it was in Series 10, but I definitely believe that it got a major buff. Now, I want to make the comment that if you grab 6 months from the first tier and this tier, I think you have a team. And again, I urge you not to think about this like the first one's the S tier and the second one's the A tier. That's not the way that this is intended to be. It's just to help you think about how to build the team and months that are potentially viable that were not before or that were super viable before. So just know that this is not meant to be an S tier or an A tier. Before I continue, please like and subscribe to the video if you've made it this far. We are trying to build a community. You may have seen that we're sponsoring the Swotopolis League. We are trying to build a community, and with your support, with your likes, your subscribes, and with you watching our content in Twitch and YouTube, we have potentially the ability and the hope to continue to do more of these. So please share it with your people, share it with your friends in your Discords, whatever that may be. It would be great help. Thank you. Now, the ads out of the way, let's talk about the maybes. These are the ones that I feel like should be good for one reason or another, but that I'm not necessarily 100% sold on. So I'm going to start with Dragapult. I've been seeing this a lot in ladder. I feel like Dragapult can be strong. I would have thought people were going to run Power Herb, and it's not necessarily what I'm seeing right now. So I want to proceed with a word of caution with Dragapult, because you have some fairies and you're going to have some dragon. Its two best moves are spread and two-turn. So I think it's a good one. I think we just need to look out for what's the best way to run it. Dracovish, one of the biggest problems that Dracovish has had historically, well, the first one being Dynamax, and the second one being Dragapult. If you choice Scarf it, you're not faster than Dragapult. So I would think that you should be able to build around it this time and potentially get something decent out of it. Obviously, don't run a Water Absorb, run it with Strong Jaw. And I think you're going to find that it's going to be decent. You can potentially test it out with Sand Rush and next to a T-Tar. I just don't know that it's going to be enough damage. So just wanted to throw a thought out there. Aragonite was a mon that was very strong in Series 10. And I think with the right pairings, I think it can be very strong. Just make sure it doesn't take a full power attack from a Regieleki. Aegislash is a mon that I personally hold dear in my heart. I used it a lot in Series 10. I think it's a mon that is very slept on in, that it was very slept on in Series 10. And I think it has the potential to be very good. My perspective in that meta was that I was running it next to Kyogre, Tornadus, and Serena. And I was running a Power Anklet, and I was guaranteeing a one-shot to Cernius before Geomancy. So I was running Shadow Sneak, Gyro Ball, Wide Guard, King's Shield. So I was running it in such a way that I was making Cali Shadow get stuck and just Wide Guard the heck out of it, and then just Shadow Sneak it. And then I would just pick up a KO. It could also survive a non-Life Orb Astral Barrage. So I could, if I knew it was a Life Orb, I would Gyro Ball and then Shadow Sneak. If I knew it was Life Orb, I would just Shadow Sneak. If I was running against a Tapu Lele or something like that, I would potentially override that terrain with a Rillaboom Serena combo. I would bring in a Rillaboom, Shadow Sneak, and just one-shot it. I think it has the potential to run Weakness Policy. It's very bulky. So I think you can get clever with it and do something cool. Weavile was very strong in Series 10. I think there's a couple of ways that you can run it. You don't necessarily need it to be max speed. So this is a really good mon, and I would definitely urge you to think about it as well. Very fast fake out. You can Snarl, you can Icy Wind. I didn't put Latios and Latias on this list, but I think they're actually kind of decent. You can potentially Brutal Swing with this thing, and then activate a Weakness Policy, and then start going for Icy Winds. And I think that can be very strong, so just an idea out there. Mamoswine, Give this thing a life over a choice band, and you're one-shotting things with an Ice Shard. I think it has potential. It also has Oblivion, so you can't intimidate it. I think it can be very good. I think it needs a little bit more testing, but I think it can be very strong. I've just never been a huge fan of Mammosaurine. The Tapu Fini was on the first list. The other three, I think, have potential. I think Tapu Bulu is the one with the lowest potential, especially having Rillaboom and being 4 times weak to poison types. I think that there is a place for it, especially having Horn Leash, having access to Superpower. I think there's a place for it. Tapu Lele, I think it's much stronger than it was in other formats. Being a Fairy type, being a Psychic type, having Terrain. I think if you pair this correctly, I think it has a lot of potential. You could even, and this is a very old tech, like you could run this thing with a Scarf, and you could potentially even give it like a Wonder Room. Like there's some weird things you can do with it. That's all I'm gonna say. I think you could also run it with a Trick Scarf, and basically just lock somebody in the wrong move, and then Tapu Lele can sweep. So that's just something to think about. Tapu Koko, I think, can be very strong. I think there's a couple of ways to run it. I think you can run it physical with Adamant nature to potentially one-shot a Tapu Fini. I considered mix, and I wasn't that big of a fan after I started doing some calcs with it. I think you put a Focus Sash or an Assault Vest on this, or even a Life Orb. I think it can do a lot of work. With that electric terrain, overriding terrain for the other ones, and then doing a lot of damage. Buzzwole is kind of a weird pick, but Stab Bug with the amount of grass types in the meta might be an interesting pick. Same with Gully Support actually, which I also didn't put in the list. Stab Fight Move, also very interesting. I think I don't quite know what's the best way to run it, but I think it's an interesting thing. Alolan Ninetales has the potential to be one of the strongest one in the format. Aurora Veil, Freeze Dry, Moonblast, I think has a lot of potential, but it's basically paper. I've played against a lot of them in testing. I haven't lost to a single one, if I'm recalling correctly. And if I lost against one, I was just trolling the match. I think it's very easy to counter, but if you play correctly, all of a sudden you have an Aurora Veil up, and there are some ones that are just not going to be able to break it. Spectrier was very strong in Series 7 and Series 9. I think this is a mon that has potential if you can set it up with an SD plot. I think people are going to try to replicate a Kelly Shadow, and it's not quite as strong as Kelly Shadow. I think it's a little bit better defensively, because a lot of Shadow Sneaks are not going to one-shot it anymore. Actually, I don't think any Shadow Sneak one-shots it. So it's just something to think about. I think if you set up this mon correctly, you get a nasty plot off, and it's going to get out of control. Lurantis is one where it just feels like it should be good, but then you remember it's Lurantis. Being able to do superpowers with Contrary, I think there's a way to set this thing up. I just don't know what the best way is, but I feel like there's a way to run this thing. Lilligant, I don't think Sun is good. But if you're going to make Sun work, it's probably going to be through Lilligant. You got to remember that in previous metas, one of the key reasons why you wanted to run Venusaur was because of the Gmax Vinelash. You don't have that anymore. So all of a sudden, Lilligant has a little bit more special attack. It still has Sleep Powder, and it has After You to enable Torkoal to do an After You eruption. And sometimes you can even run it without the fire, or the sun rather. So I think Lilligant's an interesting pick. I'm just not convinced yet. I'm going to talk about this 4 together. This is kind of the permutations of Rain that you can run. Pelipper was very good in Series 10 because he would hit Serena and Rillaboom. If you recall the finals of the World Cup, Alex Gomez was in front of an Incin, and he had the option of going for a Scald or a Hurricane on that slot, and he had a Kyogre team, or not a Kyogre, I think, no, he had I can't exactly remember what his team was, but, oh, now I remember, his opponent had a Kyogre team, and his logic was, if I Scald into Incin, I'm going to one-shot it, but if they switch into Serena, I don't KO it. If I Hurricane, I still do a lot of damage to Incin, and I one-shot it was a Choice Band Serena. And I win the game because I have Rillaboom in the back. He had Pelipper Station, Rillaboom, I think it's what he brought. He went for a Hurricane, and everybody was like, oh my god, what a great read. That wasn't a read. That was an excellent play. Hurricane was the correct play. And it ended up winning the game. I think Pelipper has a lot of potential, having those similar amounts in the meta, being able to protect something like a Kartana from fire moves and such, I think has potential. I think Politoed has 2 sets that it can run. Well, Pelipper actually has a Tailwind as well too, so that's something there. Politoed has, I think, 2 ways to run it. This spread that I have, I think, was designed to tank a Grassy Seed. I think I created a Grassy Seed, Grassy Glide. I created another set that you're going to see later. I think there's a couple of different ways that you can run this, but I think pair this with Gothitelle and a Specs Kindra, and you go for Parry Song and people are just going to be completely doomed. I think you can also run this with Choice Specs. I think if you look at Juan Nar's Players Cup team, where he had a Choice Band Rillaboom and a Choice Specs Politoed, I think you're going to find that that team can be quite decent. I wouldn't necessarily run Choice Band on Rillaboom. I think you can, and I think it's good. There might be other better items for it, but I think Specs Politoed is something that hits really hard. Specs Politoed is something that hits unreasonably hard. So if you do Helping Hand Muddy Water, all of a sudden you have a water spout. It's kind of like a budget water spout. So again, something to think about. You can also replace that for Hydro Pump and just like YOLO hit a massive amount of damage if you manage to hit. Ludicolo is someone that I personally don't like, but I see the value in it. In other metas, I think if you pair it with a Kyogre, you go for like fake a water spout, Icy Wind water spout. You don't have that option anymore. I think your range setters aren't quite as strong. Well, I don't think, I know they're not quite as strong as Kyogre. So I don't know that. I think Ludicolo is more of a support mon with that fake out Icy Wind, but I still think there's value to it with an Energy Ball and Scald. So I think there's a way to make it work. So just, I wanted to include it here. Arcanine has been good in other metas. And I think that if you in other non-max metas, so I think there's a way that we can make this work. Especially because it's a fast Intimidate and Snarl, not Fake Out, Heat Wave and Will-O-Wisp. You can potentially even run it offensive with something like a Flare Blitz and such. It also gets Wild Charge and Play Rough. So, it's a couple of things you can do with it. I wouldn't sleep on it. Dusclope is one of the main beneficiaries of not having to deal with Kali Shadow. You still have to deal with Urshifu, but if it doesn't have a Choice Band, it doesn't KO it. Or at least you can EV for it. So I think it's a mon that can be decent if you play it correctly and pair it correctly. Same with Raichu. I think you can run Focus Sash. I think you can run Assault Vest. I think it's another one that can run a Brutal Swing. Potentially activate a Weakness Policy on somebody. And obviously Nozzle start paralyzing things. I think Raichu can be quite decent. And being able to run Volt Switch or you know, the mons with U-Turn or Volt Switch are quite good. Something that I actually didn't mention on Kingdra and Ludicolo, you can give this thing Flip Turn too. And basically, yeah, just leave the Choice Specs, just Flip Turn, and you can switch in. So, something to think about there. I think those moves are going to be quite strong. Sylveon, there's supposed to be a lot of Urshifu in the meta. Being able to Hyper Voice it should be strong. It learns Mystical Fire, you can drop some stats. I've run this thing with Hyper Beam before. Don't sleep on it. It can hit very hard. All of a sudden, you do a Pixie Blade Hyper Beam on a T-Tar or whatever that one is, and people do not expect to see that KO. I've gotten a lot of rage quits from that before in other meta, so look out for that, and feel free to test Hyper Beam on this thing. A Sumail, you might tell me, yeah, but there's a lot of Rillaboom and Cortana, like you said, and so forth. Yeah, but I think you can manage and you can plan for it. Seeing his Belly Drum, I think there's a way to make it work. If you can make it work, I think it's very strong. Gyarados, so a lot of work in Series 10. It was Intimidate, good check for Station. I think there's a couple of different ways to run it. Just make sure to safeguard it against Regieleki, maybe with Raichu or something like that. Rotom Wash, public enemy of Rillaboom as well. Again, pair it with the right things, and I think you're going to find that this is a helpful one. This thing has Will-O-Wisp, it has Hydro Pump, has a couple of decent moves, so something to think about. Togedemaru, someone that kind of looks like a meme, but I think it can be very strong. This thing has Lightning Rod, Sturdy, and Iron Barbs. Has a couple of good moves. I definitely have an eye out for it. Ninetales I had actually put on my Dark Horse list, but I promoted it and then I forgot to delete it from the other list. I've gone for +4 Heat Waves before in Sun. This thing hits hard. Don't sleep on it. I think it's not necessarily good, but I think it's something that is workable. Salamence, similar logic to Dragonite. I think also with Intimidate it can be quite strong, so have an eye out for it. Naganadel, I feel like, is something that can potentially replicate the success of a Sarnias, for example. This is what I mean. Give it Nasty Plot, give it Timid, and make it so that it gets a Beast Boost for speed. It can get out of control very quickly if you pair it correctly and you play correctly. Excadrill is a good mon where there are a lot of fairies. So have an eye out for this, because this thing can carry rock moves to hit Volcarona, ground moves to hit the likes of Instinct and Eleki. It's immune to Eleki, so a couple of things that you can do with this. Finally, the Dark Horses. Again, I have Ninetales. Dragalge is going to be my first one. You're probably going to think, what the F? This thing has adaptability. Give this thing a weakness policy. Pair it with like a Bronzong. I didn't talk about Bronzong before, but I think Bronzong's kind of good too. Pair it with Bronzong, do like a Bulldoze on this, and all of a sudden you're dishing out adaptability step damage. It can be quite good. Alolan Marowak and Marowak, Lightning Rod. I think you can potentially make this work on some rain teams, and I think they can be decent. Don't sleep on them. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you they're good. I'm gonna say give them a shot if you need a similar role to fill there. Salazzle is another one that you're gonna go like, what the heck is this? Another grass 4x resist, fairy 4x resist, very fast fake out. In singles, it's very common to run it with Substitute and Toxic. I would not advise you to run Toxic, but I think there's something that you can do with this one. Now, finally, we're going to talk about a couple of cores here. I've been seeing this a lot. I really like Volcarona with Rillaboom. I think if you put a screen behind this, I think you can potentially do a little bit of work. I will advise you, and you do whatever you want with this piece of feedback. People are going to call me heretic for saying this. Make your Rillaboom's 129 speed, because that way you're faster than Jolly or Timid Gothitelle, and you can fake out before it. Word of caution, do whatever you want with that piece of information. I think this can be very good, and I think this can get out of control behind a screen, behind a Nasty Plot, and a +1 speed. I know that sounds like a lot of setup, but it might be less than you realize if you start playing with it. Now, going back to the next core. This is very strong, I think. You have 2 ways to hit fairies. You have 2 ways to hit Tapu Fini specifically. 3 ways, actually, to hit Tapu Fini specifically. You're going to override that terrain from other terrain setters. I think this can be quite good. This is a common Fire, Water, Grass core. I think a lot of you have considered this and tried to build around it. In case you haven't, this is probably very good. This is one of the things that I was talking about earlier. If you can pull off that pair song, I think this team can be very strong. I think you just need to figure out what to pair it with for the other months. Where's the mouse? And finally, I think this can be quite good too. I think Suicune can be quite bulky. It can tank Aggressive Glide. You can give it Citrus or Leftovers. There's a couple of things that you can do with it. So I just talked non-stop for almost 40 minutes. So I'm going to stop here. There are a million more things that you can build. I couldn't possibly talk about all of them without making a 10-hour video. Please tell us in the comments what are some things that you think we missed. What are some strong ones that you are looking forward to work with? And let us know in the comments what you think. Feel free to reach out if there's anything that you want to talk about, if there's anything you want to test. More than happy to sit down and work with you. Hit us up on our Discord, like us on Twitter, like us on Twitch. We're readily available for you, man. Whatever you need, we're here to help. So feel free to reach out, and thank you for watching.